Hi, Tom Walls, Carbide Processors. Want to talk about testing, grinding coolant, or machining coolant, or anything else. This happens to be coolant. It's a bottle of coolant, properly labeled with the company name Carbide Grinding Coolant from a CHF-210 Volmer. It is a Volmer 707 coolant. They sent this to me to have it analyzed. And first thing you do is let it sit a couple days, and then you tilt it and see what settles out. On this one, virtually almost nothing settled out, but it's a dark black in color. This means that it's full of extremely fine particles so fine that they stay in suspension instead of settling out. The lid is screwed on well. There is plastic wrap underneath as a sealant. Thank you and it came in a plastic bag. Thank you very much. A bottle of coolant that leaks all over the box on the way to me doesn't do anybody much good. First thing I do is test for pH. This is pH strip testing. Comes like this in a roll. You pull it off. And what you do is you take this. And you don't need this much. You just need enough. I'll show you here in a minute. Okay, you dip it in and you pull it out. Okay, you can see where there's been a color change to a dark green. Then you look at the front and match the two together. So the dark green on this one may be a 9, a pH of 9, which is probably 9 or 10. It's probably a little high, which means it's basic. pH stands for percentage of hydrogen ions. Not important, really. The pH is a measure of the chemistry of it, and if anything happens to change the chemistry, reaction with the air, tramp materials, sort of, but bacterial action, if anything happens, it'll show up on the pH. So it's a real good way to tell the condition of your coolant easily and simply. There's that one. We also have these strips. Because I'm old and suspicious, I like to do 2 pH tests. They sell pH meters. pH meters are electronic meters, and I think I have several. What happens is the wick dries out if you don't use them enough, and then you have to calibrate them. These strips are pretty good. If I use 2, I usually get pretty close. So on this one, what happened is I dipped it in. I better show you a new one to compare. I don't think okay. Here is, let's see. This is a new one. This is one that's been used. This one you can see the dark green color change. These are supposedly more accurate because they have the 4 boxes. What you do is you hold it, and you hold it upside down from the way most people would hold it. You hold it like this, upside down, and then you go to compare, and you can try and match the 3 colors up. Now on this one with the 3 colors, yeah, with that bottom one with the dark, it's looking more like a 12 or a 13. So this one says that it's higher. The problem with the first one is that when you get down to the greens, when you get into the greens are they're hard to tell comparing against this because the textures are different. Okay, that's pH. This is Quantifix. This is a cobalt test. This is a relatively new cobalt test. The strips are expensive, but they're really, really good. You do not, unlike the old ones, you do not have to refrigerate this. It doesn't have a shelf life. What you do is you start with this. There's a little white box at the end. You dip that little white box, just dip it into the coolant, and this one turned blue. Okay? You read on the side of the chart, you match the colors, and it's a lot easier to do in real life than it is without this. This is important because this is probably a 250, which is really high. Cobalt can cause hard metal disease. If you inhale it, it gets in your lungs and causes a scarring, and then you die a long, slow emphysema-like death. If it gets in your bloodstream, you can have a lung transplant. You can transplant both lungs. You can buy another year or two of life, but if it's in your bloodstream, it's going to get back into your lungs. A small percentage of the population has a sensitivity to cobalt. It's sort of a sensitivity like a nickel sensitivity, if you've ever seen anybody that gets a rash dealing with nickel. But anyway, that's the way I test for cobalt. Easy, simple test. You ought to be, the very top is 10 milligrams per liter. The government is concerned with your exposure, but Boeing aircraft will change the coolant if it hits 10 milligrams per liter or more, and this one was closer to 250 milligrams per liter. So this one is really high. Part of the reason this sample was sent to me was that the guy doing the work would really like to have the mill pay for better coolant management. This is a bug check tester. It's two-sided. One is a little darker than the other, and it looks sort of like honey on the side with little ridges. What you do is you grow bacteria. You dip it in, and we'll show you that now. You dip it in your coolant, and this bottle isn't quite full. So there we go. So we've got coolant on both sides of it. We put it back in the container. Then we'll set it on a shelf out of direct sunlight for 2 or 3 days. And then when you're done, you count the colonies. So you'll see little spots grow on it. Some spots will be bigger than others. But you count individual colonies because each colony started with an individual bacterium. And that gives you an idea of just how much bacteria there is in your coolant. So that is some simple tests. Those are some simple tests for coolant that you really, really ought to be running. They're easy. They're simple. The bacteria is a little bit more expensive, but you're talking very little money then to run them once a month. It'll tell you where your coolant is. Your coolant will last a lot longer. You'll also prevent a lot of exposure to dangerous elements such as the cobalt in the strip, or you'll tell if there's bacteria in your coolant, and you don't want to be breathing the bacteria. The bacteria that likes the coolant likes you too, just fine. So a little bit about testing coolant.